Hey everyone, I'm Stefano, otherwise known as Ten Bagger, and with me today I have John Passalacqua. He's the CEO of First Phosphate Corporation. Hey John.
Yeah, how's it going, Stefano or ten bagger? I don't know what I should call you.
Either or is good. It's going great, and I'm happy to meet with you today. And I got some questions for you that I'm sure a lot of people would like to know about your company because commodities have been booming, and I don't think a lot of people know about phosphate.
Yeah, well, I mean, phosphate, we're in a very special type of phosphate. We're in what is igneous phosphate, phosphate from the stars, as I call it. It's phosphate that has been trapped in magma for, millions of years. And that is the purest form of phosphate that you'll find on the planet, the top 1% of the phosphate out there. And until recently, we didn't really need to have this, Stefano, because we didn't need that for agriculture, for fertilizer. But now that we're talking about ultimate purity for batteries, having this very pure phosphate, it means everything because almost 100% of the material that we should be mining in at our site in Saguenay, Lac Saint Jean, Quebec, will go into making purified phosphoric acid, which is the basis for making LFP cathode active material for batteries. Whereas when you're dealing with sedimentary deposits, only a small portion of that can be purified up, while the rest of it stays back in a very non-pure fertilizer stream. So what we got is so pure that basically we just supplied just directly to the high technology market, not having to touch the commoditized fertilizer market. So that's really the key behind this igneous phosphate.
Oh, that's and I was looking into it myself, and I seen that a lot of companies they need that high purity. So that's something that your company is doing is definitely very in demand by companies that are looking to use more LFP batteries because a lot of the other batteries, typical lithium-ion batteries, to my understanding, they use a lot of cobalt and nickel, which could be quite expensive. And with phosphate being a part of these new LFP batteries, they need that igneous phosphate, that very high pure form, and it's very in demand.
Yeah, exactly. The nickel, manganese, and cobalt, those batteries are still used for very high-end uses in SUVs, but for everything else, it's LFP, not only for the cost, not only for the availability of the materials, but also for the fire safety. The phosphate does not have the same available oxygen that does, some of the compositions with nickel, manganese, and cobalt. So they're much better on fire resistant scale. So a lot of even the vehicle manufacturers are moving to this.
Well, that's not something I heard of. So that definitely is a huge positive because sometimes you see these EVs, they go up in flames. It's hard to put them out. So, if we have better batteries that are able to reduce that risk, that's huge. So I'm going to go through some other questions with you that we could take a look at. And let's start with I think you've kind of answered some of the first ones. Is for those new to First Phosphate, how would you describe the company's mission in one or two sentences?
Yeah, so our mission is very simple. It's the mission that we've been hearing about for the longest time out of the governments in North America was, having a fully dedicated local supply chain for certain production of certain materials. So we are in the midst of creating the full local supply chain for the LFP battery industry in North America, one that goes all the way from critical minerals to the production of the battery. And that's a long way, but we've actually done that in miniature. And maybe you can show this graphic up on the screen where we have, I think it was 6 steps. We started with the igneous anorthosite rock in Saguenay, Lac Saint Jean, Quebec phosphate, igneous phosphate. We then concentrated that to phosphate concentrate. From there, we made purified phosphoric acid. From there, we made iron phosphate. We blended it with lithium, made lithium iron phosphate. And then from there, we took anode material from Nouveau Monde Graphite, and we made the first LFP batteries made with 100% critical minerals from North America. 2 of 4 of which, the phosphate and the iron, actually came from our property. So that was a critical moment for this company and a critical moment for North America that shows that we can get independence in the supply chain. So that's really what we're all about. To answer your question, is really about landing this LFP battery supply chain from cradle to grave here in North America.
That is definitely something that's needed because, and even the government's talking about it, how we're too reliant on China and South Africa and Russia for a lot of the commodities, the metals, the minerals that we're getting. So the governments are looking to get production happening or mining happening locally, where we can have our own supply chain integrated within our country. When you're mining these minerals, you're not selling anything yet. These are more test runs.
Yeah, really good question, Stefano. So what we've done, so when we went from igneous and orthosite rock all the way to making an LFP battery cell, believe it or not, we had those battery cells tested afterwards, and they would the way they test them is they charge them and discharge them over like 1,000 or 2,000 cycles, and they came out with fully commercial results. So these were made in small and miniature. There was only about 100, 150 of them made, but they were made in such a way that they're fully commercially ready. So what we've done by doing that basically is we've basically validated the whole process from the rock to the transformations and getting it to battery. So that means that all these materials and all the processes that have gone into getting to those batteries are fully valid. Why? Because they can create a fully functional commercial grade LFP battery at standards of anywhere in the world. So that was really, really key.
So how critical is phosphate to these LFP batteries? So to my understanding, it's a huge component, and it's not just that they need a tiny amount in these batteries, they need a decent amount.
Yeah, so it's so critical, and this is a really key point to anybody in your channel that's involved in lithium stocks. There's about 300, 500 lithium stocks that you can buy all over the globe. You can buy them, on TSX exchanges, US exchanges, Australian exchanges, Hong Kong. You can buy them in London. But how many phosphate companies are there that are specifically geared to high purity phosphate for the LFP battery industry? And believe you me, I believe it's only one that's dedicated and strictly focused on that. We don't touch our agriculture. We don't want anything to do with it. So what does that mean? Inside of the cathode of the LFP battery, okay, which is where the lithium is as well, 40%, 60% of that is phosphate, okay? So what does that mean? So you can't create the battery unless you got the phosphate. So basically, if you have 300 of these companies all over the place producing lithium, that's great. But if you don't have the phosphate, you won't be able to make the battery, right? If you're missing any one of these elements in making a battery, you can't make a battery. Same thing with nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries, right? Because of the cobalt's hard to find. It's only found in certain areas where there's issues over labor, and the nickel is hard to find. It's expensive, so that's why they kind of stopped, or they've gone away from nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries. Well, LFP batteries, okay. So iron is out there, right? L is lithium. That's out there. Iron, it's out there, right? There's iron powder. But then phosphate, P, you need the highest purity form of phosphate in the world. And so far, they're only getting that mostly off of the back of fertilizer production, taking the very cleanest part of it, and not all the producers produce it because you need a certain volume to do it. So then where's the rest of it going to come from? So what I'm trying to say here is that a company like First Phosphate, humbly speaking, unlocks the value of all that lithium. All of that lithium might very well be locked unless you can get to the phosphate, because we know you can get to the iron, you got to get to the P to be able to satisfy the L. And in NMC, there's lithium, there's nickel, manganese, cobalt. Those minor elements, have caused problems for that supply chain. So phosphate, very critical for the LFP battery, which is now over 70 to 80% of all batteries produced on the face of the planet. And it's not just EVs; it's data centers, it's energy storage, it's small, utilities and mobilities like wheelchairs. All of that stuff is going on to LFP, as is things like drones. Robotics, automation, with EVs being only a very small component of that. So all of that gets locked by phosphate. That's why we feel we're sitting on an extremely valuable resource here at First Phosphate, being perhaps the only company in the world that's got access to this pure igneous phosphate rock and is fully dedicated to bring it into production, but just for the LFP battery industry with no interest in fertilizer whatsoever.
Oh, this sounds extremely interesting to me. Because this is not something that I've known myself. I've heard about lithium. I knew that they need lithium in batteries. I knew that they need copper in batteries. I did not know that they need phosphate in batteries, in these new LFP batteries. And that are becoming more widely used. This is a huge development and knowledge for me. And you're right, I haven't heard of any other phosphate companies on the market. You hear of tons of lithium companies, copper companies have been on the rise, but phosphate is something that I don't think enough people are educated about. Can you give us an overview of your key phosphate projects in Quebec and what stage of development that they're at?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Stefano. We've got about 1,500 square kilometers of claims in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec. There's a big body there called the igneous anorthosite, and it goes from there all the way up to Labrador. But the problem is that a lot of this stuff is found in like caribou habitat near or in lakes, and it's far. You can't get to it. You really need to be close to infrastructure because phosphate is bulky, right? It can go for about $350 to $700 a ton for this igneous phosphate. That's US dollars. But it's got to be close to infrastructure because there's a lot of moving. So what we did is we staked out all the claims where we saw that there was this igneous anorthosite that were closest to the port of Saguenay, which you might have heard about. That's where they want to put all the critical minerals through between for the Ring of Fire in Ontario all the way to Quebec to get it out to European markets. So we staked out all those claims. We have two properties now. We have a property called Lac L'Orignal, which is sitting in a PEA state. But then we have another property, Bégin-La-Marche, which is sitting in a PEA state as well. And we're now moving that one to full-scale feasibility study with the monies that we've raised. We've recently raised $20 million over the last 5 to 6 months. And all that money is going towards the feasibility study to move that property from PEA into feasibility study and hopefully into production.
How long from today do we potentially see production coming online?
Now, so we've got definitive offtake agreements for a large portion of our mine, from somewhere between 25 to 40% of the mine, and that goes over to Europe with definitive bankable offtake. The other 60% of the mine remains with us for transformation into phosphoric acid. So those offtakes are ready for 2029. Meaning that right now, until the end of 2026 is when we do all of our feasibility studies. That's bulk sampling, finishing that up, definition, drilling, environmental studies, and then writing up the feasibility study. And then after that, Q1 2027 is permitting. And then after that, you're basically doing engineering and making a decision and starting to build out the concentrator for the mine, which it's a very tight timeline, but we're expecting for mid Q1 to Q2 of 2029.
Okay, awesome. In regards to permits and permitting, the government has been talking about fast tracking projects like these. How is your relationship with the indigenous communities, and how is your company navigating through all the ESG, environmental safety concerns and governance to make sure that this project is fully approved and that everything goes through as planned?
Yeah, good question, Stefano. So basically, we've got the right professionals on the team that manage all of that. We have a full collaboration agreement with our local Indigenous group, but it's not only the Indigenous group. We've got two municipalities very close to us. We got full collaboration agreements and letters of support with them, as well as with local equipment suppliers and the Chamber of Commerce. So we're pretty entrenched in the community. That was one of the first things we did when we came into the area, was really to understand the community and how it worked and where the best place was to look for the phosphate and to set up the plans for looking into an eventual mine at some point. And it was really about knowing the local community. So I feel that we're very good at this point, and we take into account all of the considerations. We have numerous public meetings. We try to stay very much in touch.
Awesome. That's very important to people because as we've known, at least with the government in this country up till now, it's been hard to get permits and all this stuff and everybody on board, and there's been sometimes things that get in the way of these projects getting approved for construction. And so if the government is taking the right step in fast tracking these projects, and you already have key relationships with Indigenous partners, with the cities and the people in the cities, then that's very important in order to bring this project closer to production.
Yeah, I'll just add to it. We find that that's really the most important part of it is, your local relationships, because sometimes when you have a drilling permit or something you need done, if you're in good standing with the municipality, then all of these groups have to kind of look and approve these things. It goes fast. And then, we've had really good letters of support written by our Indigenous group and also by the municipalities and some of the associations in the area that have really helped us on a lot of things. They helped us to get phosphate onto the critical mineral list of Quebec and Canada. They helped us, with getting responses back to the Quebec ministries and the Canadian ministries. So that's really the secret to it. I know everyone's always looking for the federal government to do something, or provincial government, but we find actually local is where you really need to be based and make it work, because that's where most of the little minutia goes through. So we're very strong on the local level. I'm proud to say about that. That's it, really accelerating our project.
Awesome. And I'm sure a lot of people would be happy to know that. What does your cost curve look like, and how competitive will your production be against overseas suppliers?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So first off, we're into igneous phosphate. It's very rare. There's only one other really large producer of igneous phosphate, and that's in Russia. So they're kind of behind sanctions right now. There's some other smaller producers around the world, but they don't necessarily have the purity profile. They have rare earths in them, like in Brazil. So a lot of that goes into the agricultural industry. So really, the world, especially the Western world, really needs another igneous phosphate producer, and that'll be us. Yeah, we're in really good shape in terms of that. Our costs are very low. We meet sort of the cost curve of pretty much the Kingdom of Morocco to a certain point. I know that's a big statement to make, but just because of our purity profile, and the fact that we have secondary recoveries, our costs are kind of similar to theirs. But it's not that we're competing in that game, because Morocco is mostly into the fertilizer industry. But nonetheless, we're down at the low end of the cost curve. But with the igneous premium that comes to this, we're way in good territory. And I said, before, lack of real competition for this igneous phosphate, because until now nobody really needed it that much. But now that we're talking batteries, and the demand on batteries is going to make it such that the demand for purified phosphoric acid, which is already there, like purified phosphoric acid that goes in the batteries, will go into things like Coca-Cola. It'll go into things like yeast and other baked goods. It goes into things for freezer burn. It goes into like furniture cleaning equipment solutions. It goes into water treatment. It goes into cosmetics. It goes into pharmaceuticals. It goes into fire extinguishers. So there's already an existing need for purified phosphoric acid out there, but that has been stable over time. It's stable to growing, but we're going to have to increment that by 5-6 times here in the next 5 to 10 years. And there's no other way to do it than with this igneous phosphate, because only igneous phosphate, 100% of it pretty much, goes into purified phosphoric acid. So I tell a lot of people, they say, well, can they not make it out of sedimentary rock? Yeah, you could make it out of sedimentary rock, but you'd have only 20% perhaps of your production can go towards PPA. So that means you have to make five fertilizer plants, right? Fertilizer producing phosphate plants for every one plant that I can make with igneous phosphate. So you'd have to make 25 to get to 5, and I just have to make 5. Or if I make one plant of purified phosphoric acid, that's like equal to 5 fertilizer plants. But think about all that fertilizer that you got to put somewhere. And the world is pretty much, it's pretty much an equilibrium with the fertilizer, a little bit high, a little bit low. But I tell people, for all that demand that you need, well, you got to create another 30. I mean, Benchmark Minerals has come out and said, hey, you need to create, or us in the Western world, we need to create 30 new purified phosphoric acid plants to meet this demand. That would mean 150 new fertilizer plants if you're doing it with sedimentary rock, which would mean you basically have to colonize Mars to be able to dispose of all that fertilizer, right? So it's not humanly possible. You can only do this on igneous rock, and that's what the world is starting to understand, or hasn't understood yet. But we're making that very clear, and that's why we're so bullish on this igneous phosphate in the market that we're in.
So this definitely puts you ahead of the curve as you're looking towards the future, and a lot of these changes that are happening with batteries right now and increasing demand, or expected to be increasing demand on phosphate, but especially igneous phosphate, because that higher purified form is definitely a lot more valuable to companies looking to produce high quality batteries. For all the things that you've said, such as robotics and the mobility, is not just EVs and data centers and storage. There's a lot of potential here. I want to talk about what is the expected life of the mine here, and what is the current value of, or the current estimated value on the reserves of igneous phosphate in the mine?
Yeah, so maybe what you can do is you can put a little picture of the mine of the mine graphic on while you're showing this to your users, and I'll speak to it in simple terms because not everybody's very familiar with mining. I don't want to get into complicated geological explanations, but let me simplify that down. So the property that we have at Bégin-La-Marche is between two municipalities, municipality of Bégin-La-Marche. It's 1 kilometer from the paved highway, the paved provincial highway in Quebec. And believe it or not, this deposit is on surface. So it's like a big gravel pit, if you will, okay? And it's 2.5 kilometers long. Think of something that's 2.5 kilometers long. That's a long way, right? That's like, I don't know if anybody's in Toronto, it's like from North York all the way down to almost to Yorkville or something. So it's a big long deposit, and it's 2.5 kilometers long. It's 300 meters wide, 300 to 500 meters wide, and it goes down to about 350 meters. 350 meters. That's as far down as we've gone. We know the phosphate could go down to about a kilometer and a half, just because of the way it's done in sort of sections. And we know that these mines do go down to a kilometer and a half in Russia. So what I'm trying to say here is, we're what I'm going to give you now is based on what we have today, which is probably maybe a fifth of probably the entire deposit if we really had to exploit it all. So based on what we have today, currently in the feasibility study, it's about 23 years, okay? But we know that could easily go up to 50.
23-year mine life estimated, but up to 50.
Probably, it could probably very easily go to 50, but we're starting with 23, okay? And it's enough phosphate in there. It's 300, enough phosphate to make 350 gigawatt hours of LFP battery. Okay, well, what does that mean? So what can 350 gigawatt hours of LFP fulfill? Easy. That's enough batteries for 6 million cars. Okay, so what is 6 million cars? Well, the production of cars, of new vehicles in North America, being Canada, USA, Mexico, is about 12,000 per year. So that deposit can, for the next 23 years, basically satisfy half of the vehicles produced in North America if everybody wanted to move these cars onto LFP. And now, that's only 5% of the LFP. Like EVs, even though that's what everybody talks about, it's only 5% of the EV sector. So can you imagine? I mean, even though this deposit is so massive and it could fulfill all of that, it still barely makes a pinch in what our needs are going to be here in North America. So the sky's the limit for a company like First Phosphate. There just isn't the ability to supply this stuff. And all that other lithium, as we were saying earlier, is going to remain fundamentally landlocked unless there's more phosphate or there's more NMC to be able to make these batteries. Aren't thinking it through. People don't think it through. One company comes out with lithium, everyone's like, oh yeah, you need lithium in the batteries, da da da. Well, what else do you need? Well, okay, then they started thinking a little bit nickel, okay, manganese, cobalt, but what about phosphate, right? So this is key what we're doing here. It's key to electrification. So if you own all these lithium stocks, you might want to own a little bit of a phosphate stock that is clearly dedicated to LFP battery, because otherwise all your lithium there is going to be very difficult to make anything out of it unless you got phosphate.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And I want to ask you, I don't know if you have a number, how much revenue could this company potentially pull in per year based on current igneous phosphate prices?
Yeah, so let's start with some traditional mining talk. So the NPV, the net present value of this of this deposit, that's at 8%, and that's unlevered, and that's with a 20% contingency built into it for the plant. Very conservative. Is 2.1 billion Canadian per annum, okay, over those 23 years, and the internal rate of return, the IRR, is at 37.1%. Those are extremely high values, but that is at very low phosphate prices. So for igneous phosphate, it was done at very close to what is the current price of igneous phosphate, which is the lowest it's been in the market in 4 or 5 years, because the prices are moved that way because Morocco has a lot of sway in those prices, if you can get what I'm saying. But we've seen those prices 2-3 times higher. So what would that do? Where would we be in terms of an NPV and IRR when that happens? They're probably going to settle in around double, especially for igneous phosphate, because it's going to become so rare, especially with LFP battery. Now, in terms of currently at current prices, it's a cash flow of about $250 million per annum over those 21 years. And it's a 2.9 year payback on the expense. Strip ratio is 1.5 to 1. What else can I tell you about it? So those are all very, very good numbers.
And well, with what you said was estimated 37% profit margin.
Internal rate of return, yeah.
Yeah. And so let's just compare this. So what is the market cap of First Phosphate?
Yeah, it's really nuts actually. So companies are, and after a PEA, before they get through feasibility, they trade at what is, a percentage of their NPV, their net present value.
Yeah.
So I gave you an NPV of 2.1 billion, and so we're kind of trading at about $100 million market cap in or around there. So we're trading at what, almost 5% of our NPV. Okay, we were trading at 2% of our NPV not so long ago. Now you have got to look at where do the other companies trade in the space? Well, there isn't too many in phosphate, right? Especially not in igneous phosphate that we know of. Okay, so you start looking at uranium. Let's look at uranium. Well, let's look at gold. I know that some of these companies in uranium at the PA stage, they trade at 20 to 30% of their NPV. We're at 5. We're in phosphate, right? Because people don't know it well. They're getting to know it. But what else is great about our company? Guess what? We've got no royalties on the phosphate. There's no royalties on the mine.
So you own 100% of the mine, First Phosphate?
100%. Yeah, we bought out all the royalties because we knew what we had in hand, right? And we didn't want to be encumbered by that. So we bought all that out. And then also we have no debt in the company. That's very, very important. And basically, so
no debt, and you're sitting on how much cash right now? As you mentioned before, you raised a decent amount of cash.
Yeah, we're sitting at near $20 million in cash right now. So we can get on a very accelerated program here very quickly. The other thing I was going to say is that basically when you're sitting at 5% of your net present value, okay, that's one thing. But we're sitting at 5% of our net present value on a project that's sitting at 70 kilometers driving distance from the Port of Saguenay. It's sitting on hydro. It's got the proper backing of the governments, the Indigenous group. We're sitting at the low end of phosphate prices. And the other very interesting thing is, we've got fully bankable offtake on 25 to 40% of our production, and the rest of it stays with us to make purified phosphoric acid at the Port of Saguenay, which we'll be processing ourselves. Okay, and then another 40% of that production is off-taken as well to the same European off-taker. So, where should you be? Where should you be? Where should we be trading? Should we be trading at 5% of our net present value, or should we be at 10? Should we be at 20? Should we be at 30? Should we be at 40? Where should we be after the feasibility study? I don't know. You can look at different industries and different analyses. Where are these gold companies sitting? I mean, on the Lassonde curve, once they hit something, sometimes they get to their PA, sometimes they're as well 20, 30, 40% of their NPV, depending on what the resource is. So hopefully, in terms of minerals, we're probably undervalued. And especially in terms of a mineral that, you can't get anywhere else, and we might be the only game in town to unlock all that lithium, where do we sit? So that's something people should consider.
Awesome. You mentioned that your company is looking to process the igneous phosphate as well. So I've been reading about your company, and it's aiming to be a fully integrated supplier. Can you explain that to the audience?
Yeah, so if we go back to that little diagram that I was asking that maybe you could show to your audience as well. There's 6 steps to get to an LFP battery. I won't say that we'll be doing it all, but first step is mining the rock. Second step is to concentrate it into phosphate concentrate, and the third step is to make it into phosphoric acid. So at the Port of Saguenay, our off-taker has given us a license to use their technology, which is the first technology ever really in the world for making purified phosphoric acid. So they've given us a license to be able to make phosphoric acid at the Port of Saguenay. So what will be happening is the mine site will produce 900,000 tons of apatite concentrate, phosphate concentrate, that will all be delivered to the Port of Saguenay. Up to 400,000 tons will go to our off-taker in Europe, and 500,000 tons will stay back for us. Okay, and when that 500,000 tons stays back for us, that will be converted into purified phosphoric acid. So out of that 400,000 tons, that will go to other off takers, 1, 2, possibly 3. That de-risks the operation, whereas the other 500,000 tons stays back for us to make that purified phosphoric acid, which then goes into making LFP cathode active material.
With alternative chemistries competing for attention, what makes you confident in the long-term future of LFP?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked it a lot, and I actually asked it myself a lot. There's a video, if you go onto our YouTube channel, when I was in Montreal at a conference and when we unveiled these batteries for the first time back in, I believe, July of this year. And a gentleman that's been, as part of the beginning of LFP in North America, Professor Karim Zagib, he says in the interview, as we're being interviewed, he says he sees LFP being the lead acid battery of the next 100 years. So the lead acid batteries being the batteries that are in cars that have been in there, for almost 100 years. He sees the LFP being the same thing, just because of the versatility of the technology, the safety, the low cost. He doesn't see anything coming in to replace it. But let's assume that he's not 100% right. Let's assume that something does come in to replace it. So you might have heard of sodium ion batteries. Okay, well, that doesn't really affect us most part. I mean, I don't know all the ins and outs of this sodium ion battery, but that would be, instead of being lithium ion, it's sodium ion. So it would replace the lithium. That's what I'm telling everybody. Be careful with all your lithium stocks, because if you don't have phosphate, you can unlock it. And then, something could come in and challenge that, like sodium. I don't see it, but it could. So sodium could make a dent, but then you have sodium iron phosphate. You have sodium iron phosphate cathode active material. So the phosphate's still there. People talk about vanadium coming in. Okay, then I've looked at some of these companies and make vanadium iron phosphate. Vanadium iron phosphate batteries. So I just keep seeing the P and the phosphate coming up over and over and over. So I'm pretty comfortable around phosphate, but there's another really, really, really important thing, Stefano. And the reason that I got involved in this is because if something really changed dramatically with electric batteries, let's say graphite was no longer used, that'd be a big problem, because you'd have to then default to hockey sticks and baseball bats and frames for glasses and badminton rackets, whatever else is made out of graphite. Lithium, there's not that many uses outside of electrification. Unfortunately, there are some, but by far electrification is a big part of that market. But the wonderful thing about phosphate and high purity phosphate is that there's such a shortage of it already for agriculture, but not only normal standard agriculture, like I was saying, the big farmers fields, but really the hydroponics and the direct grows. They all really need a really high form of phosphate, because it feeds the roots directly. So there's so many other, like if batteries went away tomorrow, all of our production could go into agriculture and food, and it would not be a problem whatsoever. So we got a great backstop, right? That's why I say to people, right, all your traders on there, you got 10 baggers. I mean, if you're making 10 baggers, you guys also got your stop losses, right? So I'm an ex markets guy. I was a market maker on the floor of the Toronto Stock Exchange many moons ago, and the big thing was always the stop loss, right? So for me, getting into this phosphate was really important because I saw the stop loss. And what's a stop loss? The agricultural industry is always there. We're going to need 10 times the amount of phosphate just to feed humanity. It's going to be a massive issue on the agricultural side. So it's a perfect backstop for us that you don't find in the other materials.
Well, that was a great way to explain that right there, where it's the stop loss. It's the plan B just in case. But as of now, everything is looking in favor of LFP batteries and the future of phosphate. So agricultural side and fertilizer side is only a bonus on top, and as well as a plan B. Ask you one or two more questions and then we'll wrap this up. So where do you see First Phosphate in 5 years if everything goes to plan? And what's the single most important takeaway that you'd want investors and the public to understand about your company today?
So First Phosphate in 5 years, obviously I see it in production. I see it as one of the biggest known names in the electrification space in terms of critical minerals and making LFP possible, lithium iron phosphate batteries possible. And I see it as kind of being like, Mosaic and Nutrien right now. They'll get you from a mine of potash and phosphate all the way to a bag of fertilizer. we'll be part of some type of a really integrated supply chain that will get you from what we've already been able to do, get you from rock in the ground, igneous phosphate rock in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec, to an LFP battery. So that's what I see. Biggest thing I like to listeners to go away with is, yeah, you can invest in 300 different lithium stocks, but if LFP is the future, where are you going to get your P? Who is the only company in North America, in the world, that's focused on high purity phosphate and building a fully integrated LFP battery supply for North America? When the USA and China bicker at each other, China will come back and say, hey, we're going to stop gallium shipments, we're going to stop rare earth shipments, and sometimes they'll say, we're going to stop sending you LFP batteries. So think about it. This is just like those rare earth plays that are going nuts right now, because everyone's saying, wow, it could be cut off. So, and if it's off, First Phosphate as a solution, and we proved it, that we built it.
Thank you so much, John. I loved having this interview with you, and I'm sure my audience is going to be really excited to dig more into your company. And I look forward to talking with you and seeing the progress from the company throughout the future.
Yeah, that's great, Stefano. Thank you so much, and I look forward to many 10 baggers for you and your audience. But do your research and buy the companies that are 10 baggers, because they have great operational plans, and not the ones that go up like Christmas trees and come right back.
Well, it sounds like your company is quite planned. So let's hope in the future holds for this company that this may be one of the 10 baggers.
Let's hope. Future shall see. We're certainly doing all that we can. And just so your listeners know, during the last 3 years of very tough markets for the electrification trade, where they're throwing out the baby in the bathwater, we stuck it through. We worked hard. Just in January or February of this year, myself and my management team, we had to go in and buy about $1 million worth of shares in the market in the 20 or 30 cent range, because of everyone was selling them because they were scared of the end of the world with Trump. Remember that? The tariffs and the end of the world and in January, February. So we backstopped the company, and we put our money where our mouths are. And that's also a very important thing for your listeners to look at, who is actually backing their companies and who believes, and who sticks it out in the tough times. But that's First Phosphate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you. Pleasure, Stefano.